the way home from Israel a few months ago, Debbie sent me a link to an article in USA Today. She said, "This is what you should talk about for the holy days." The article was about happiness. So I began to think about it. My first thought was, well, Jews aren't happy. After all, in a game of word association, the word Judaism does not often prompt happy. In defense of our tradition, I want to say that I don't think there are many religions that would prompt happy. Buddhism, maybe. Judaism, not so much. And then my second thought was, well, maybe it's not all Jews, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm not a happy guy. And then I thought, well, what if Judaism actually commands us to be unhappy? That wouldn't be such a great Rosh Hashanah sermon now, would it? This year I'm going to talk about happiness. I'm not happy. Judaism commands us to be unhappy. Good Yom Tov. As I thought a bit more seriously about it, I realized that in the past 30 years of my life studying Judaism, in a serious way, I've never had a course on Judaism and happiness. I've studied the persecution of Jews, I've studied the nature of God, I've studied about faith in God, I've studied about fear of God, I've studied the rules and the laws and the halakha of Judaism, I've studied about life cycles in ancient Israel and modern Israel and Zionism and the Holocaust and the expulsion of Jews from virtually every country in the world. I've seen many movies about Judaism and Jews, and I can't really say that I've emerged from any one of them in a particularly happy mood. Maybe Fiddler on the Roof. I've read perhaps hundreds of works of fiction about Jews. There's not a lot of happiness there. And so after thinking about her suggestion, I realized that I've certainly never spoken about happiness from the Bima. I've never taught a course on happiness. I have never really talked about happiness in any systematic way. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the importance of the issue in the modern world. Thus, I embarked on a journey to explore the issue of happiness, to reflect upon a very important question. Am I happy? We talk anecdotally about happiness all the time. What does it mean to be happy? I think every human being in the Western world at one time or another asks the question, am I happy? Not about a moment in time, but as a matter of existential existence. Speaking only for myself, I'm not entirely sure what happiness means. Is it about health? Is it about wealth? How is my happiness connected to your happiness? Can we control happiness? Can I work to make myself happier in the same way that I keep myself in shape? As you might expect, I first turned to Judaism. Now, if you ask me about many subjects within Judaism, the answers roll off my tongue quite easily. Life cycles, holidays, Jewish history, worship, philosophy. I'm asked about these all the time. And I have answers, ready to go. Yet, in all these years of being a rabbi, I cannot remember a single person asking me about happiness. Rabbi, what does Judaism say about happiness? Maybe that says something about me as a rabbi, and maybe it says something about us as Jews. In any event, I really had to pause and think hard about Judaism and happiness. Upon further reflection, of course, I realized that Judaism has a great deal to say about happiness. In the beauty that is our sacred tradition, there is a rich, nuanced, and sophisticated teaching about happiness that merits learning. The first place to look is the Tanakh. The word happy appears in the Tanakh many times. One of the sons of Jacob is named Asher, happy. By far, the word happy occurs most often in 2 books, Psalms and Proverbs. In fact, the very first word of the very first psalm is happy. Ashrei ha'ish yashav asher lo halach ba'atza'at risha'im u'b'derech hata'im lo amad u'b'moshav leitzim lo yashav. Happy is the one who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand out among the sinners, or sit in the seat of the scornful. The Hebrew suggests that someone who is happy is someone who stays on the straight and narrow, who isn't distracted by sinners and evildoers along the path of life. Another way of looking at this verse in Psalms is that someone with a strong moral compass is happy. Someone who understands the difference between right and wrong, who is not swayed by the temptations of liars and cheaters, those who bend the truth for their own purposes. A person who doesn't associate with those kinds of people, that's a happy person. Perhaps the most famous statement of happiness in the Psalms is the phrase Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, which is Psalm 84. It's the very beginning. This phrase is so significant that it is the first phrase of one of the most important prayers of Shabbat, which is actually called the Ashrei, kind of like the happy prayer. Happy is the one who dwells in your house. Here is a clear articulation of a fundamentally Jewish premise. The closer your relationship to God, the more faith you have in God, the happier you are. And if you examine the use of the word happy in the Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible, you'll find that this is a recurring theme. Happy is the person who is close to God. A person who is close to God, according to the worldview of the Tanakh, is a person with a strong moral compass. Surprisingly, this turns out to be true not merely in the biblical worldview, but also in the American worldview. The results of a 2011 Gallup poll of more than 600,000 Americans, that's a lot for a poll. And the results of this poll are quite clear. People who define themselves as either more religious or very religious are happier than people who define themselves as moderately religious or not religious at all. This does not mean all religious people believe in God, and I'm not suggesting by any means that religion and believing in God is precisely the same thing. Yet, the Gallup poll is just one of many serious studies that link happiness to either religion or belief in God or a strong moral compass. At the moment, the serious scholarship is compelling. There is a relationship between religiosity and happiness. So the Tanakh was onto something. The studies do not tease out exactly what it is about religion or about God that makes people happy. Is it the communal nature of going to synagogue? Is it the ritual of prayer? Does it matter if it's actually God, theologically, or something like God? Is it possible to be a happy atheist as long as you believe in something? These things are not clear. But what is clear is that if you are actively involved in a religion, you are much happier. Now, the Tanakh is not the only part of Jewish sacred scriptures that has something to say about happiness. Rabbinic literature, too, offers quite a bit of advice about happiness. Many of you are familiar with Pirkei Avot, or the Ethics of Our Father, a tractate of the Mishnah that is a collection of aphorisms that offer insight into the rabbinic understanding of what it means to be a good person. Almost everything in Pirkei Avot can be tied to happiness. In all likelihood, everyone here knows one of the most famous sayings of Pirkei Avot. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? This idea of Rabbi Hillel certainly could be part of happiness, but looking for something more. It turns out, as luck has it, that Pirkei Avot asks exactly the question, who is happy? This is asked in a famous passage that asks 4 questions. They're almost existential in nature. Who is wise? who is strong, who is honored, and who is happy? And the answer to these 4 questions offer insights into the Jewish view of happiness. Who is wise? The person who is able to learn from everyone, not merely one who learns from teachers, but one who can learn something from virtually anyone. A wise person, says Pirkei Avot, should be able to learn from a child, a poor person, a wealthy person, a powerful person, a weak person, or a fool. Who is strong? A strong person is someone able to subdue his own passions. This takes strength and courage. A person is strong who can hold his tongue when provoked, who can resist the inclination to do evil. A person is strong who can resist ice cream for dessert. A person who can act with grace under pressure. This is a strong person. Who is honored? A person who honors others. A person who is honored is someone who is polite, who shows courteousness, who cares for others before himself, who speaks well of other people. And finally, who is happy? A person who is content with his portion. A person who does not covet what others have. A person who does not need to be validated by others. This is a person who is happy. However, this is not quite as simple as it seems. As I considered this teaching that a happy person is content with his portion, I realized its complexity, its subtlety, and its nuance. The idea that a happy person is one who is content with his portion is, in my view, the key element to happiness from a Jewish perspective. But the challenge of being content with your portion is that being satisfied with the status quo seems alien to the human condition. The conundrum we face is this: when does being satisfied with your portion tip over to accepting mediocrity? How do we reconcile the innate human desire to achieve excellence with an acceptance of our lot in life? The creative geniuses of the world, the bigger-than-life artists and entrepreneurs that give flavor and inspiration to our lives, are rarely content with their portion. This is, in some manner, the very essence of genius and creativity. In some ways, being happy with your portion is an impediment to success. Few of us in this sanctuary are happy with a high school diploma. Few of us would be happy with our first job, or our first job out of college, or even our first job out of graduate school. We don't even consider wanting a better job as not being happy with our portion. We don't see a conflict between wanting to move beyond our first job out of school and being happy with our portion. As I look back upon my own life, I see the recurring theme of not being content, or of being content, or more likely not being content with my portion. As I reflected upon my own happiness, one thing stood out very clearly. The happiest job I ever had was as a bus driver. During my junior and senior years, I worked for the University of Michigan Transportation Department. I drove a 45-foot bus, exactly the type of bus you see in any city. I worked 5 days a week from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. I made, 30 years ago, $12.25 per hour, which was a tremendous amount of money, and it's still well above minimum wage today. I loved that job. I was really happy doing that job. And over the years, I've tried to think about the reasons I was happy at that job. One reason was that the expectations of the job were very clearly defined. Be at a certain place at a certain time. Don't get into an accident. Don't go over the posted speed limit. Drivers were actually graded. I always got an A. And if you were ranked high enough, you got to serve as a private car driver, so you'd get to pick up visitors at the airport, for example. Now, when the Gerald Ford Library at the University of Michigan held a huge event in honor of President Ford, I got to drive a host of dignitaries on my bus for about 300 yards, including Henry Kissinger and Elliot Richardson. I was really happy that day. You know what it's like seeing Henry Kissinger get onto a bus? It's great. Over the years, I've wondered why that job was not enough. There are, after all, people aside from Ralph Cramden who make their living driving a bus. It's true. Since I was so happy in that job, and it is not simply a matter of knowing the perspective of age, from the perspective of age and experience that I was happy then, because I enjoyed that job while I was working at it. So why didn't I become a bus driver? After all, shouldn't you be content with your portion? What's wrong with being a super happy bus driver? Well, there are many answers. The job was not really challenging. There's only so much you can learn about driving a bus. And the job was not particularly fulfilling except beyond the feeling of a job well done. Obviously, earning potential was limited. Whatever the reasons, never for a moment did I even consider a career as a bus driver. On some level, I understood that being a happy bus driver for my entire life would not necessarily make me happy. I was not content with my portion because, as happy as I was, for whatever reason, I did not feel that being a bus driver was my portion in life. So I graduate from Michigan and I spend a couple of years traveling, being a reporter, doing this or that, not being content with my portion. So I go to rabbinic school. And reflecting upon my decision to go to the Hebrew Union College, I know to this day that being a rabbi is my portion in life. And in more than 22 years now as a rabbi, I feel as though I'm doing what I should be doing. I'm not quite sure I believe in the idea that anybody is meant to be doing something, but I imagine that if the phrase has any meaning at all, I am meant to be a rabbi. But finding the right career does not mean you are happy with your portion in life. Few rabbis aspire to be assistant rabbis, though some do remain assistants their entire careers. Few lawyers aspire to be associates at a large law firm for their entire careers. So once you are even content with your actual career in a general way, this doesn't necessarily mean that you are happy with your portion. If being content with your portion of a career is difficult, being content with our portion in relationships is even more difficult. We think that a different teacher or a different politician or a different doctor or a different spouse will be much better than the one we have. Perhaps we feel that our children do not meet our expectations. The very nature of the human condition seems to be that we find it very, very difficult to be content. If only my son or daughter had been accepted to Harvard instead of Yale. If only my daughter was a doctor rather than a rabbi. If only my spouse was better looking or earned more money or was taller or shorter. When do we finally say that we are happy with our portion? Maybe if we say we are happy with our portion, we can't really be happy. Certainly most of us would not have been happy with our first job. But what is the right balance? When do we say this is it? When we make senior vice president, when we're promoted to president, when we earn $100,000 a year, when we earn $1 million a year, when we have 20 cars, when we have 200 cars. But the problem is, if we don't strive for a promotion, we run the risk of being complacent or of not striving for excellence. In my quest to answer what seems to be a very simple question, am I happy? I learned that this one idea, being content with one's portion in life, is one of the core components of happiness. It may not be the only component, but it looms large. To be content with one's portion is a key to happiness, perhaps the key to happiness. Yet being content with one's portion seems almost as elusive as happiness itself. In an attempt to resolve the issue of being content with one's portion, I returned to our 4 questions from Pirkei Avot. Who is wise? Who is strong? Who is honored? Who is happy? What do these 4 characteristics have in common? The answer is humility. According to Pirkei Avot, a person who is wise or strong and honored, and yes, someone who is happy, is a person who is humble. Judaism teaches quite clearly that humility is one of the most important personal characteristics. And here in Pirkei Avot, we have a strong indication that humility is also a key component of happiness. Who is wise? A person who learns from others. If you believe no one has anything to teach you, you are most certainly not humble. Conversely, if you open yourself to learning from others, you necessarily believe that you do not know everything, and by implication you value other human beings. Who is strong? A person who subdues his own passions. At its core, this quality requires humility. Though you may occupy a station in life that allows you to trample the feelings of others, do you? Or do you merely bark orders to those for whom you are responsible? Who is honored? He who honors others. Again, humility at work. Finally, who is happy? He who is content with his portion. This is perhaps the ultimate form of humility. When the quality of humility is part and parcel of who you are as a person, then, and only then, are you truly able to be happy. In common parlance, we accept a definition of humility that is not accurate. We understand humility almost as a lack of belief in oneself or some sort of lack of self-esteem. We have a communal idea that a person who almost says, oh, no, I'm not really as good as you say I am. We think that a person who says, I am the best doctor or football player or rabbi is not humble. To be sure, this is a component of humility. Yet imagine if Albert Einstein were among us here in this sanctuary. And imagine that I said to him, Albert, are you the single most influential physicist of the 20th century? And imagine further that he said to me, yes, in fact I am. Would we understand that as a lack of humility or merely a statement of fact? According to Pirkei Avot, humility has nothing to do with a person acknowledging his own value, his own excellence. I can strive for excellence and still possess the attribute of humility. I can want to enrich myself intellectually and even materially and still possess the attribute of humility. I can acknowledge that I am the best in my field, and I still can be humble. Rather, the attribute of humility is about how I treat others. In my effort to enrich myself intellectually, for example, if I come to believe that I have all the answers and you have nothing to offer me intellectually, then I no longer possess the attribute of humility. If I want 3 cars because I notice that you, my neighbor, has 2 cars, I am no longer humble. If I believe my success is a result of only my talents, if I believe this great company I built is a result only of my own business acumen, if I am unable to acknowledge the contribution of others, I am not humble. Moreover, if as a result of my superior intellectual abilities I diminish you, I am no longer humble. If I use my intellect to bludgeon you into accepting my views, I am not humble. If I, as a result of the immensity of my wealth, diminish you, then I am no longer humble. If my own intellectual or material wealth is at your expense, I am not humble. Seen in this light, being content with your portion in life takes on a new meaning. We become discontent with our portion in life when we use others as the barometer of our own status. My goal is not to improve myself intellectually for my own sake. My goal is to be smarter than you and to prove to you that I am smarter than you. My goal is not to acquire another car because I like cars. My goal is to have more cars than you do. In doing this, my own happiness, my own ability to be content with my portion becomes connected to you. I can only be happy when I have more degrees on my wall or cars in the garage than you do. Such a person, according to Judaism, is not truly happy. I once knew a beautiful young girl who grew into a beautiful young woman. She was born deaf and she could not accept it. She wanted to hear in the worst way. She refused to learn sign language and tried to act in every manner as though she could hear. She railed against anyone who offered to make any accommodation to her hearing loss. Each time I offered to have her sit toward the front of the room so she could more easily read my lips, she refused, angrily. She wanted to hear. She observed that there are in this world people who hear, and she measured her life as a deaf person against the life of a hearing person. It wasn't so much that she couldn't accept that she was deaf. It was more that she couldn't accept that others could hear. She could not accept her portion in life. She lived a reckless life that resulted in her death at a very young age. I once knew another beautiful young girl who blossomed into a beautiful young woman. She, like her younger sister, was born deaf. She, like her younger sister, wanted to hear. She expressed to me moments of frustration with her condition, yet she did not lash out at those who tried to help her. Each year during the holy days, she would ask me for a written copy of my sermon in advance so she could follow along. She would remind me to trim my mustache so she could more easily lip read. She had many friends among the hearing and among the deaf. This woman embraced life and now lives a life of blessing with her husband and her children. If this sermon was to have a happy ending, I would share with you at this point that, yes, I am happy. This would be great. Quite obviously, this would be the best possible ending for this sermon. I would stand before you and say that after considering the approach of the Jewish tradition to happiness, I, your rabbi, am happy. I am content with my portion in life. I can reflect upon my life and see that I possess the attribute of humility. This would be a great ending to this sermon and a great thing for my life. Dramatically, the next best ending for this sermon would be for me to declare that I'm not happy. And in truth, according to the standard I have defined, a standard I think accurately reflects the Jewish approach to happiness, I probably am not happy. Too often, I am not content with my portion in life because I measure myself against, not because I measure myself against me, but because I measure myself against others. Too often in life, I allow myself to be defined by others. I spend too much of my time wondering why I didn't take another path in life. There are too many moments in my life when I fall victim to feeling that material success in life is the only barometer of happiness. There are an equal number of moments in my life that I allow the professional accomplishments of